ايفنت عندنا مده واحنا نخمم شنو بعد كما قال زياد عملنا بليزيور سورت ايفنت معناها ايفنت دوردر بوليتيك دوردر سوسيال دوردر ايكونومي ايفنت كولتورال حبينا قلنا شنو نجمو نعملوا تبعنا نتبعوا في تونس نتبعوا في الاحداث في تونس قلنا بدات توا يمكن من اهم الاسئله والمحاور اللي تطرح في تونس هي بدون شك هو النوع الانتخابي الجاي. برشا سمعنا برشا حاجات قاعدين يقالوا في تونس بما يخص هيئه الانتخابات يخص طريقه الانتخابات حبينا كخطوه اولى على الدرب هذا النوع الانتخابي اللي جاي حبينا قبل ما نغزروا قدام نشوفوا شنو نجموا نتعلموا من الاكسبيريونس اللي صارت لنا في 23 اكتوبر اللي فات. حبينا نعملوا هذه صوت كيما ديبا راوند تيبل ديسكشن نستدعوا فيها خبراء في الميدان الاحصائيات في الاستاتيستيك تاع الفوت تاع ليزيليكسيون. ولا يشرفنا اليوم سي لطفي الهرمي بحدانا جانا من اريزونا هو استاذ دكتور في خليني عندي الوحده باش نعطي كل ذي حق الحق في الرياضيات. سي لطفي الهرمي دونك قرا ميكانيكال انجينير في ميزوري كولومبيا يونيفرسيتي بعد عمل ام اس في الابلايد ماثيماتكس فروم اوهايو يونيفرسيتي وعنده بي اتش دي في الابلايد ماثيماتكس في ميزوري كولومبيا يونيفرسيتي. هو حاليا اسيستنت بروفيسور اوف ماثيماتكس في اليونيفرسيتي اوف اريزونا. visiting professor at Marshall University and Georgia Institute of Technology. كان عندي لوكازيون دخلت السوميستير بتاعك شفت ده. He also organized several international conferences هوني في اليو اس ولكن ايضا abroad centered around voting theory and the isoperimetric problem. يعني كنت بعد isoperimetric problem. دونك فوالا بعد نعطيوه الفلور نخليه هو عمل هو بحث في ولا دراسه في الانتخابات التونسيه اللي فاتت ونخلي نعطيه الفلور ونخليه هو يقدم لنا البحث نتاعو واكثر بالنسبه لي انا نحب نشوف رؤيته للانتخابات الجايه شو من الحاجات اللي تعلمناها من الانتخابات اللي فاتت ونجموا نصلحوهم ولا نجموا نبنيوا عليهم الانتخابات الجايه. هذه في القسم الاول من الراوند تيبل بتاعنا. بعد في القسم الثاني بتاع الراوند تيبل باش نحاولوا تكون عندنا قراءة في نتائج الانتخابات بعد معز ونوال يزيدوا يتعمقوا أكثر لأن حابينها تكون تواصل البريزونتاسيون البحث بتاع سيلوتي ويكون أكثر مركزة أكثر في القراءة لنتائج الانتخابات اللي فاتت ودور بعض العوامل الاقتصادية البشرية الجغرافية الاجتماعية في فهم الخارطة السياسية للانتخابات والأحزاب. كما قلت معنا اليوم في البريزونتاسيون هي الدكتور نوال عمروشي. الدكتور نوال عمروشي هي اسيستنت بروفيسور اوف ماركتينج في LAU لونج ايلاند يونيفرسيتي. عندها البي اي بتاعها من HEC تونس وماستر وبي اتش دي من HEC مونريال. She has published several publications and had participated in meetings in international conferences. بعد عندنا دكتور معز حبابو دايركتور حاليا في ريسك اند بزنس اناليتكس في UBS. عنده بي اي من HEC زاده وماستر من لافال يونيفرسيتي وبي اتش دي من في المانجمنت ساينس فروم يورك يونيفرسيتي. قبل ما recently هو appointed recently director في UBS. قبل كان خدم في باركليز وفي RBS في الريسك مانجمنت في الماركت ريسيرش. هو زاد عنده several academic contribution published في scientific journals and conferences. قبل ما غير ما نزيد نطول عليكم دونك نحيل المسرح ماباش مسرح نحيل لك المسرح سي لطفي باش يقدم لنا البحث نتاعو.
So I'd like to thank you all for putting this together. Very happy. So in answer to your first question about the isoperimetric problem, it goes back to this origine de la révolution. So this thing has to do with this very ancient problem of Analysi coming to Carthage and the story of the ox hide. So, so iso means equal, right? And perimetric means equal perimeter, right? So if you fix, this this row that you're trying to enclose a piece of land, right? And you ask, what's the shape that should maximize the living space given fixed perimeter? And the answer is curvature. Pearson, in fact. Anyway, so so I'm going to talk about why Tunisia is Switzerland. So I chose this title actually, in fact, on the basis of an article that appeared in the Washington Post on the 28th of April, which was quoting Ghannouchi. But the story of Switzerland is old, right? Because myth has it that Bourguiba wanted Tunisia to be the Switzerland of the Arab world. And you can see why, right? Society was pretty progressive way back in the 60s, right? So they got voting rights in 66, especially women, and before the Swiss and the Portuguese. Okay, so people think high themselves for a reason, right? Okay, actually this article is on this harissa.com website. It's a Jewish community based out of France. And there's, I think, a harira.com for auction. Just to go along, right? Okay, so yeah, there you go. See, this is an homage to President Bourguiba on this website, in which this guy, Majouji, Rahim Majouji says, that's just the right? Okay, that's from the website. And as chance has it, I ran into someone I know in Tucson. She's an old lady, she's the wife of a colleague of mine. Her name is Edith Shaker. Haddad, last name, the original name, in fact. She grew up in Nablus. So on this website, she was, remembering we learned this. It's like, like, she was 10 years old when she left. She left in 62, I think, after the Jalal, the war with France, right? Because these guys were half French for a reason that goes back to the 30s. Okay? And her father was the Grand Rabbi of Nablus. In a couple. Okay, so this is the Washington Post, the piece that I'm referring to. It's a good piece actually. So it kind of puts the current debate in a context, right? The context is that you have, even though the revolution was about that piece of bread. I mean, bring the bread home, right? Bring the bacon home. There's no bacon, it's haram. Talks about how society has morphed. Within a year, you have these debates within families, right? About religion, and this kid that grew a beard, and now he's calling everybody an infidel. It's a fun piece. Okay, where's the quote of Ghannouchi? Somewhere here he says, the bottom one, yeah, the Switzerland of the Arab world, right? And in fact, I'm lucky, right? Because I chose this before, and there is a direct quote from 2 days ago. He wants Tunisia to be the Switzerland of the Arab world. He says, in fact, it will be better than Switzerland, right? So you can download the video from that website. That's how he identifies himself. He wants to fix things, right? So I'm putting this not to badmouth anybody, because I'm not trying to do it. But you got Bourguiba on one side, who thinks Tunisia is the Switzerland of the Arab world, and you got the Islamists who think Tunisia is the Switzerland of the Arab world.
It's better.
Huh? It will be better, right? So we should take it to task with that, right? Yeah. And of course, depending on where you stand, you can think of him as the devil behind the throne, right? Or, this new controversy of someone declaring him at the Zituna that radiallahu anhu means, so God has forgiven his sins. And there's a recent interview of himself where he talks about the controversy. Okay, I'm not gonna go beyond this. But lots of Arab countries think of themselves as the Switzerland of the Arab world. You got the Abu Dhabi people, right? Dubai, you got the Palestinians, you got the Lebanese, of course, and us. I mean, every country is peculiar, its own history. Okay, this is from yesterday, right? Because what I'm going to be talking about is, in fact, the story of this ICE, the Jandubi electoral, the electoral commission, it folded yesterday, right? So we can think in terms of OPSEC of this thing as if it died, right? And already propaganda is appearing all over the place, right? So these people don't like it, right? So I'm not sure actually, whatever I read in Arabic I trust, I don't trust it in this thing. Okay? But already there is talk about Amr al-Araik becoming the head of a new committee. This is from the official Facebook of the ISA. Okay, I'm not going to talk about this number, even though I would like to. Okay, so this is the editorial, in fact, about this morning, about the ISC and its clones, and they think it's the best thing that came out of the whole process. This is the press. Okay, now I'll tell you really about why things happened the way they did, and why a lot of people think this is messing up things for them all over the place. Okay? Okay, so here's a question. So I'm going to talk about numbers, really, because that's what we do, right? For a living, right? So the question is, for example, suppose you have a population of P people, right? I mean, P is 10 million in the case of Tunisia, and you would ask, what's the ideal size for such a population, right? Then you have to have a cost function, because that's what you do in the financial world, right? So the cost function in this case is a balance between two things. You want your member of parliament to be to have direct communication, Isam Mubashir for Giver, with the population. So, for example, if you have one representative, imagine that representative talking to everybody. There will be like P channels of communication, right? If you have two representatives, that's P over 2, right? If you have N representatives, that's P over N, right? So you have communication channels with the population, and P over N is in fact the 60,000 number, right? Remember there was a 60,000 floating about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. That's the quota, right? That's what they call this, right? So you can think of a quota, that's what the quota is, right? And you have also communication channels within the parliament itself, right? So it's N choose 2, we don't combinatorics, right? N choose 2 because you've chosen 2 people out of N. So, and roughly it's like N squared over 2, right? So it's a balance between these two things, and as you can see, this is a hyperbola and that's a parabola, right? And if you add them up, you get a minimum, right? And the minimum is exactly the cubic root of the population. So this is called the cubic root law. Cubic root law has to do with what? You give me a population, in order to get the ideal size of your parliament, I take the cubic root of that population. So if you take about 10 million, the cubic root is about 117. And in fact, before the revolution, does anyone know what the size of the parliament was?
One.
في تونس قديش؟
واحد بس.
لا.
واحد بس.
قديش؟
Practically one.
Way back in the days, that's when we left in the 80s. Yeah, that's like very old. I mean, like 218. Actually 221. 221, and then there was a lot of debate about what the size should be. So numbers were floating all over the place, right? 218, 219. Right?
Is this universal? Like wherever
so this is not universal, right? But this is a mathematical model, right?
Yeah.
To explain a social phenomenon. In this case, actually, the paper that did this cubic root goes back to the 70s. So these actually physicists turned political scientists, right? So physicists, they're good at modeling things. So they take their art to a new field, right? So they look at the numbers for the size of the parliament in the UK over the span of 200 years. So they can measure, they know, at least 200 years of data that they can build a regression out of. So the power in that case is about 0.2127, right? But every country has its own power. It's a power law. So that's one. And the second one is, most people who do this kind of modeling, they say, actually, you get represented in the parliament if you're an active and a tax-paying person. And so they talk about the active populace. So if you pay taxes, you get to be represented. You don't pay taxes, you're out. So if you don't have a job, you're not counted. If you're a kid, you're not counted, right? So it's a fraction of society. So if you take that fraction of society, that means the number of representatives is going to go up or down. What do you guys think? You take a fraction rather than the full population. Obviously, it's going to go down, right? Okay, substantially. Okay, so it could be active populace. تفضل سيدي.
Donc starting point نتاعهم was this formula rather than حتى انا toujours eu l'impression اللي هما يبداو chaque gouvernement عطاوها سياج باش يخلطوا ل 217 على حسب
No, I'm going to explain to you where the heck they got all those numbers, right? Yeah, but this is again wave your hand type of law, right? I mean, that is justified by a regression. Looking at many societies, right, that have established democracies. Even though, like in the case of the UK, they don't have a constitution. We've been writing a constitution.
They don't have a written constitution.
They don't have a written constitution.
They have a constitution, but they don't have a written.
Yeah. It goes back to this Magna Carta from the 12th century. Way back. Shakespeare's time. Okay, so this is how 217. So basically, if you look at the, if you look at the website of the ISAE, how they got these numbers. They got the official numbers from the Institute of Statistics, right? And you can see the PDFs of all, I mean, really lousy PDFs of all the states, I mean, all the cities, the regions, in fact. I mean, Tunisia's official number, the official number that they use is adds up to 10,600,000, right? This is in January 2011, right when they started putting this law together, in fact. Yeah. So this actually gives you about 219, the cubic root law, right? And there was, as I told you, fluctuation all over the place, right? So, for example, if you take our 217, one quick way to tell what the size of the Tunisia's population just is 217 in cubic, right? It gives you about 10 million. Okay. So I'm gonna motivate.
I think in this chart they didn't give the C-spec to Ari the Shamil.
Exactly. So that was my question. I was going to ask this question. Something is wrong with this picture.
Yeah, because it's basically this is before they gave the C-spec.
But this picture is still circulating as propaganda, in fact. But this is wrong. This is wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong.
Because I think it's
This is
26,
wrong,
yeah.
right? That one is wrong. But this picture is popular, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm using it. So, but 217, right? 217x2. So the Jewish community is coming out of the closet, right? I mean, not the closet, but coming out of the shadows of society into the mainstream of limelight of citizenship, right? Because they put 217 eggs in the growth of the Sriba just a week ago, in some sense to wish them well, right? Maybe they will succeed. Okay, this is actually true. And again, here's something that I picked up from the web. Obviously, this is true or false? You guys think?
It's false.
It's propaganda again. So this was circulating 2 days ago, actually. On a very again, everybody's using Facebook, right? So this is from Masmoudi, not the Masmoudi that is here, but the guy in DC. I'm sure some of you know him. I know him from way back as well. So everybody knows the history of everybody. Okay, but these are the true numbers from the people that design voting schemes, right? So these guys are Americans who get public funding, your taxpayers, to design things for people who are new to democracy, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because I found the exact, like the correct numbers in Wikipedia, but not in the EC website.
No, but they did, you know how it is, they're not experts, right? It's a learning process, right? I give it to them. My hats to Jandoubi and his people, right? So this is from the IFS website, right? This is official, and they like semicircles, right? But I like full circles, right? I like the semicircle too. I mean, this is much more interesting to me. This is way old, right? And it's from GEM, and it's the first picture that tells you something about hyperbolic space, even though there is no theory. Right? It's modern mathematics found in the relics of a remote town in the middle of Tunisia. Okay, So since I'm talking about old rabbits, I'm going to tell you something interesting. So there was a French engineer who tried to convince the Bay, I think it's in 1830s or something, to rebuild the aqueducts of Hadrian. It comes from Zawan all the way down to Carthage, right? As a means of bringing fresh water again to Tunis, right? Modernizing the water system. And in fact, people use it as one of the reasons why colonialism came to Tunisia, right? Because they borrowed money they couldn't pay back. What do? You take over the country. Okay? So the experiment that this guy did, actually, he looked at just the water systems in La Malga, right? Malga, in Carthage, right? La Malga, because there was a castle in Mu'annaqa, you know, it had very towering height. I mean, that was destroyed by the Arabs in the 14th century because there were a bunch of thieves killing people on the road. Okay, so the experiment that he had estimated the population of Tunisia at about 1.3 million, just based on the water consumption. Looking at the size of Salah? Yeah. Looking at the water consumption, right? So I'm going to convince you actually of this population size without doing this, right? So what are we going to do?
Look at the parliament.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the parliament and then do what to it? Cube it, right? Okay. So here's an ancient record that goes back to Aristotle, right? So Aristotle actually had great quotes about Carthage and the constitution of Carthage, and the fact that they had 500 years of bliss, right? Without sedition, without a tyrant, and he even puts to us the size of the parliament, right? This is the council of the Sufetis, they call them. Or if you use their own language, they call them Shofitim. And the Shofitim is basically Sufat, the Safa. I mean, this is the elite, right? It's Arabic, actually. This is the ancient language that's associated with doing nothing for free. Okay, if you cube it, you get about 1.1 million. That's pretty good, right? Okay, that's a picture of one of these elite guys from Libya. Okay. Not just Aristotle, I mean, that kind of had great things about Carthage, but also this guy.
But you're assuming they knew the cubic rule back then.
You're assuming it, yeah. I'm a mathematician, right? I can wave my hands. It's just rough estimate. Easy going, right? So that you remember this law, right? Okay. Madison, James Madison, one of the founding fathers of this country, where they were thinking about systems, right? They were thinking about the constitution. They looked at Carthage. They looked at all kinds of ancient societies, right? Okay, so it's not isolated, right? Even though you're bringing in something new, you look at something old, right? Okay. Stuff that was written, this is in the 1800s, right? Again, they talk about this book of politics of Aristotle, right? And in fact, there is a famous quote in Arabic that we attribute to Ibn Khaldun, right? الإنسان what? مدني بطبعه, right? So they say actually, so if you translate it, you say man is political by nature, right? From police, the city, right? That's what it is. مدني بطبعه, right? But in fact, it's an ancient expression that you know also in English under a different setting. It's called man is political animal. That's the true translation from Greek into, as it exists in English. So it's just a political animal, right? But there's a reason for it, in fact, because Arabic, when they translated Greek text, you know, they did, right? They translated the republic as Medina. So, for example, democracy. Medina Fada is utopia, you know that already, right? But also, what else? I'll give you another one, which is interesting. So, democracy, you know, people's republic or whatever, that's always one, right? You have aristocracy, right? I'll tell you what it means later on, right? What else? There's a famous attribution that was associated with Tunisia when Ben Ali left. He was in the New York Times, and it means ruled by thieves. What's the word they use?
Mafia.
نعم.
Mafia.
لا خد المافيا لا They used kleptocracy. Kleptocracy, okay? But I'm going to tell you something even nicer, right? Because the ancient expert on this ancient Greek stuff is Ibn Rushd, right? Averroes, exactly. So he, they must have read this book, right? So the question is, what did they say about this stuff, right? And hold on to that thought until I show you the slide. And again, I'm gonna just skip this stuff. I mean, this is these are books. You know, in the 1800s, democracy was a huge thing, right? The 18th century, 19th century, you got French Revolution, you know, American Revolution. Lots of thought about the nature of public, the nature of you know, political, yeah, political power. That's what I meant. So these are the roots of democracy, and they put them back into context, right? Not that I care much about being. I'm not ethnocentrist. Okay, but the funniest piece in this whole piece and this text, right, is this 500 years, right? So they didn't have any serious sedition or suffered under the yoke of a tyrant. I like it because of the yoke part, right? Okay. So this is, so forget about the ancient stuff, here's something modern. If you think about electoral systems in the world, right, they come in three big blocks, right, three types, right? You got plurality majority systems like France, the US, Egypt, for example. That means you can have a democracy without proportional representation. You can have semi-proportional representative systems like Japan, Tunisia before the revolution. So Tunisia, we moved from here to here, right? And you have proportional representation type of systems like Germany, for example, right? Including Germany of the Nazi era, because the Nazis came actually to government through proportional representation. Okay. So let's see if I hope I don't bore you with this. Okay, so these are this is the big picture, right? So since we're doing a proportional representation in Tunisia today, I'm gonna tell you what we're using, right? And what are the options? What are the other options? Right? We're using the most basic one. They call it the Harry method, after some British guy, Harry, from 1859. But in fact, the method goes back to one of the founding fathers, Hamilton, right? So some big founding fathers of this country. And they call it the Vinton method of 1850. Again, what is this P over N, guys? What was that for us in our context? Yeah, exactly. So about 60,000, right? The 60,000 of this is the quota, right? So, but you know, like Droop said, this is another British guy, right? You know, like you're better off if you divide by the number of people in the parliament plus one, right? Because essentially, if you have, say, two parties, if you gain a third of the votes, you're set. You win a seat, right? So it says you should divide by n plus one. But they tell you say you should divide by n plus two. So this is so what makes people do this? This is almost arbitrary kind of system, right? So what I'm going to tell you is actually this stuff is actually you can find it in Islamic texts as well, right? In the tradition of Ali ibn Abi Talib, in three famous examples of that. But Ali does not add one or two here, but he adds something to the people. Okay? So these are all largest main method, right? Tunisia used this one. We could have as well used these two, right? So what do? You divide by, obviously if you divide P by N, it's a whole number plus a fraction, right? So any party that has P votes, right, is entitled to P over N. The fractional part, the whole number plus a fraction, right? At least the whole number part should be there, right? Plus the fraction you have to deal with, right? You have to have a scheme for that. What do? Largest remaining, right? You look at all the fractions, and the party that gets the highest gets that seat, right? And then what else? So you have 1 round or 2 rounds? 2 rounds, right? That's what they did in 2 rounds, right? Okay, and you can do the same thing with the system they used in Greece, in Italy. This is one class. There's another class. The other classes, they call them divisor methods. Lots of divisor methods, right? And there is a variety in the C. Okay, and so what are these divisor methods? You can think of it as a vote on check, right? You know, you're betting, you're buying like bétail in the l'abattoir, right? And you have the highest, you're the highest bidder, right? You take that first head, right? You want the second one, what do? You slash the price that you're paying by one of these divisors, right? If you have that highest number, you get the next head, and so on and so forth, right? And these are like, it seems arbitrary, right? The most famous ones that people use are the Haunt system. That's what do you call this country? Belgium. That's a Belgian system. Here's another popular one, the Sandlag one. That's a Swiss system, the Sandlag system, right? And these two methods developed in these two countries for peculiarities that are particular to these countries, right? Because in Belgium and in Switzerland, you have what? You have ethnic groups, you have religious groups, and in some sense, in order to balance things, they decided about these systems. So, حاجة specific للسوسيتي. Okay. But in the US, they use a really funny system, right? Instead of dividing by 1, 2, 3, or like this is a sequence of odd numbers, like in Switzerland, right? They divide by square roots of funny numbers, right? They divide by 0. You're not supposed to divide by 0, right? Because if you take a number divided by 0, that's what, like infinity or something. So in the US, they divide by 0 because the requirement is that every state gets at least one seat representation, right? So there's what no taxation without representation. So that's enshrined in the law, right? Every state has to have at least one representative, right? So in this case, how many do they have? 435 or something? You take the first 50, you give them to every state, and then you start the count afterwards. So that means every state is betting an infinite number of votes or population beforehand. Okay. But you can see, there's a lot of mathematics behind it, right? So we're not using any of these systems. Okay. So let me show you, I told you I like circles better, right? Because circles have to do with this ancient story of the oxide and Dido and the isoperimetric problem. Okay. So this is the picture today. So the picture today is that, let's see, this is Nahda, I guess. Under the current system, Nahda gets 89 seats, right? But if you look at any of the other ones, what happens? They'll hog the whole thing, right? Pretty much, there is a reason why it was chosen this way, right? Look at the colors here. Almost everyone is represented, right? So in the effective
look like it makes another look very big compared to the others.
But you see, I mean, here I'll show you a whole bunch of things. Effectively, how many parts do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and bits there, right? So there's an effective number of political parties that people use, actually, right? And if you base off the votes, it's 6.5. If you base off the seats, it's about 5 parties, right? Okay, you can see it in the big picture, right? Okay, so check this out. So suppose you use, instead of the Harry method, the Druck one. That's what's happening here. Now that's eating it up. These are all the same. These are all interpretations of the voting numbers, right? Okay, so you can see, right?
Don't give them any ideas.
No, it's
Be
there.
changed very soon.
No, but you see.
If they see this presentation.
No, you will see actually. So remember the 5th of September, you know, Vendetta, right? Okay, so remember the 14th of January, right? So the thing is, all these systems have positive and negatives, right? So, but under any other scheme, they'll get something bigger, right? But you know, if you get something bigger, you gotta pay a price. I mean, nothing is for free. That's the game, right? Okay, so let me show you what's at stake. Okay, so this one doesn't show. You see this whole empty space? That's wasted votes, right? So people that voted and basically took a piece of paper and kind of threw it in the trash, they count for 31.7% of the vote. That's pretty good. I mean, pretty high, right? I mean, considering that, let's see, what is that? It's like 1.2, 3 million, right? It's almost as many as Nahda people, right? It does not include the people who did not vote. So here, I'm going to show you some pictures, and you tell me if this is propaganda or this is real. If you don't vote, you don't count. I mean, that's how it works in the real world. Except in Tunisia, they tried to replicate what happened in Algeria in the early 90s, right? Because the army said no to the Islamists, and the secular people said, forget it, right? You know, most of society did not vote. You got a very small fraction. So, in some sense, if you choose to be outside the system, you're outside the system. You have to have a public engagement. You want to be, you know, you want to have a say, you vote. Otherwise, it's a civil war and 500,000 people dead and nothing gained, right? That's what happened in Algeria.
So this is with the method that we.
The method that we have now, you waste 1.2 million votes.
How about if we use other methods?
If you use other methods, like Drew, that's the next in the scale, right? You lose 1.4 million, 1.34 million, right? If you use Imperiali, that's the Italian method, right? You use 1.4. I mean, if you use the divisor method, this is the biggest one. An Imperiali divisor method, no one uses this except some isolated city in the north of Russia. Because this is recent, right? Nobody uses this, right? But this one you lose about 2 million votes. It's as if no one voted, really.
So this is the least.
Yeah, the least damage, right?
Damage.
Yeah, and the least damage, and it's culturally pertinent to Tunisia because it has a historical connection with Ali ibn Abi Talib, right? Which I'm going to convince you of it, right?
So the argument that were made by many people that I heard in the news that
There's a lot of propaganda floating.
Okay.
Yeah, really from both sides, right? Because we're an ideological society. I mean, we don't care about the problems.
If you can maybe spend some time just to explain to us who are these ways involved and how we actually end up with more than 1 million.
Yeah, exactly. Like the
That's the
intuition.
thing we have. Why? I mean, because you usually never hear about this kind of thing, the latest French election or the American election. You barely hear about something, talk about the ways. No, it's for them. It's either you vote your account or you
See,
don't.
so if you win a certain number of votes, right? If you, in some sense, if your candidate does not win, it's like all those people who voted for that candidate don't count.
They don't.
They're natural to the system. I mean.
Just it means that the 49% that voted for Sarkozy are wasted vote.
In some sense, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it means,
That's
this
exactly
stuff.
what he said. Right?
No, but
No, that's what it means. That's
No.
exactly what
This is what it means, I mean.
No, but in case of Sarkozy and Hollande, we have two candidates. Of course, there is one winning and one losing. While in this case, we have a variety. We have like
You have
20
about
parties.
100 of these, yeah.
So yeah, so we are not saying.
It's the same,
So we are saying that 1,200,000 voted for all those that do not appear in this chart. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Like the independent list and
All
the other
that,
small
okay.
parties.
Exactly, yeah.
And they account for as large as the
30%.
votes for Nahda, which is the one that is leading the whole thing.
Yeah, but you know,
30%. You said 30%. Huh? I can't
it's
see.
31%, yeah,
31%,
32%, yeah. But here's the deal. If you want to consolidate politics, like for example, I show you the American system, they use it for like things between states. What happens with this one? This is Huntington, right? It goes back to the 20s. Where's the Huntington method? Equal proportions, no, 162. So the US actually tries to consolidate things. That's why you have two parties, right? I mean, you know, someone who takes power has to make a decision. So someone decided, you know, we're gonna do cutthroat type.
Yeah, but I mean, even the US had like a case of wasted vote, like back in 2000, there was like Al Gore versus Bush, like in Oregon, which was like a big swing state. Ralph Nader came into the election and he actually
messed it up. Yeah.
He messed it up
Yeah.
a lot for the Democrat.
Yeah,
And
yes.
so it means it's. But here, like in the US, it's traditionally you have you're either Republican or
Yeah, either with us or against us. I mean,
No, they chose the two-party system. So
Yeah.
it's less problem. You don't have an Italian system where you have many parties and.
Exactly. So here's the Tunisian system, in fact, guys. So here, the effective number of political parties, if you say you chose the Huntington method, right, it's about 2 parties, essentially. It's not other than everyone else. Does that make sense? If you chose this Imperiali method in which you lose a lot of seats, a lot of votes, I mean, it's basically 1 party. Even the Italians gave up on Imperiali because it's quite Imperiali. Okay. So let me ask you guys, is this propaganda or is it just a political nasty scene, right? Okay, it's natural, this is a campaign, right? All kinds of promises, right? by the leading party. Again, I'm not bad-mouthing them, but okay. So consensus, right? That's a big thing, right? They lose on the background, right? Okay, here's another one from the campaign. She asked Labib, you know, the environmental guy with the big ears, but it's still, I mean, that fox is still endangered, I mean, as a species, right? They should have thought about that one. Okay, what do you guys think? Remember this?
Yes.
This is the, what story? This is single mothers. Single moms, right? I mean, this sounds like the US, right? I mean,
Unmarried single mom.
And
Unmarried single mom.
unmarried single mothers, right? So that's almost the same as here, right? Gay rights, I mean. What else? The hijab and tradition and things important from out west, out east, I guess, in this case, right? Okay. Remember this one? How all the natives were killed, right? And the last one, yeah, he killed us with laughter, right? And it's not just that, right? No, this is, what do you guys think? This is from two different eras. The time of Zin, right? And this is Hamalat al-Hatab, etc. It's pretty nasty, I would think. I don't know. Food for thought, right? Okay.
Are these due to the overwhelming majority? Are this kind of propaganda? I mean, irrespective of the
Dunya ma
origin.
waqf, I mean,
Yes,
this is
yeah,
a
that's,
culture.
that's precisely why I said irrespective of the origin, whether it's a Nahda or PDP or something. Probably any one of them with such a huge majority and with such a waste vote, they can afford such a propaganda.
No, Nada doesn't have the machine. I mean, they're new to the game. They'll get better. I mean, in a year. But the thing is, you know, the expression that they have, "Saha lahiya tajamma," is real. I mean, people go swing with the winner.
Because
Right?
power corrupts and
Yeah,
absolute power
because
corrupts.
that's the nature of things in the case, like Ibn Khaldun says, you know, al-maghlub mula b'ittiba' al-ghalib. Because they think that probably in the character, they want for a reason. I mean, this is a social psychology, right? I mean, at least that's my understanding, right? There's another one from. So I think it's part of it is a lively political scene that we've never seen in our lives. I mean, we have to cash in on this. I mean, I love it. I mean. Okay, here's a very recent, like, this is when Qaradawi came to Tunisia, right? You know, remember half of these guys disappeared from Congo, people asking for their money back, right? For a couple of days. Again, you know, these numbers are not correct, right? The same picture that I told you from TikTok, right? People are not careful.
But if you can go back, so these are the representation that they Qaradawi gave in.
Yeah, this is the representation that they Qaradawi gave.
Okay, that's pretty
So it's not just Nada that disappeared. I mean, you know, it's
pretty
lazy
much all of
society.
them. They probably took advantage, but in terms of proportionality, yeah, that's funny. Because even in terms of proportionality, the folks, they are not that bad. Because again, in terms of presence,
They're still there.
They're still, I know, but like I said, in terms of representation, they're still there. If you compare to other parties, so
In
they're
fact,
pretty
Tunis
much.
is doing very well. Everybody's there.
But that's funny. That gives you an idea about irrespective of the party that is. We can always accuse anybody.
There's
of
a
anything.
culture.
There's a culture.
It's a problematic problem.
It's a
It's
culture.
society. Yeah, it's an endemic. I mean, you know, like,
You know, just to give an anecdote,
city,
in
yeah.
France,
Yeah.
there was a long weekend vacation,
Hey,
and the party in the government lost one vote, one important vote, because all the deputy went for vacation earlier,
I see.
and the president has to cancel that law, the law that was voted. So it's everywhere the same thing. If you have a parliament, you have presentation, people will be absent for some reason. You just for a long
Yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
That was a long weekend in May.
Like I said, I think the cultural aspect has actually.
Yeah, but you know, Tunisia is not a bad place. You know, the thing is, the hierarchy, at least from my experience, right, when I did this conference about Analysi, in Cairo 2 years ago, if you hit the right connections, life is good. But you gotta respect your elders, kind of society. I mean, it really is. It doesn't matter. I mean, you respect your elders, things will run, right? Because it's an epoch type of society. Okay, let me show you. So now I'm going to talk about propaganda in terms of numbers, right? I'm sure some of you have seen this picture. Okay, famous one, right? Beautiful website, crappy audience. I don't trust them. All the numbers are correct here. I mean, but this one is propaganda. You see, because they're emphasizing what? That all these parties are one, right? I mean, look at these numbers, right? This is, what is this, 18%? Oh, definitely that's not the case, right?
It's 18% of the entire population.
Yeah, but if you don't vote, you don't count in politics. That's the game, I mean. But if you're not a cultural person, you say, oh, these guys, I mean, what's going on? This was circulating from Bina News. That's a religious website. To me, I had a whole debate with a friend actually about whether Bina News was a fundamentalist, and he said, okay, without being in trouble. Okay, it was a religious website. So they focus on Adnan Nasser, this guy that became advisor to the president, right? Recent, I mean, like a few months ago, right? But you know, the reality that 120 does not appear in any of the calculations that I showed you. In fact, if they use a divisor method, the standard one is the Hong. They get about 160, 162. I mean, the numbers are there, you can check them. So 120 is actually way below what they would have gotten in case they changed the system, right? So they could have solved their thing better, right? In fact, you can see the whole video of Nasser, I mean, from the same time. And you can see it's propaganda, I mean, it's politics. So it could be healthy, right? Yeah. Because Ibn Khaldun says, you know, in order to gain power, the ultimate purpose of power is what? Is to enjoy its sweetness, right? But you know, the thing is, you gotta have money and you gotta have men. You gotta have militia.
سامحني دكتور، السؤال اللي يطرح نفسه شكون اللي يقرر علاش عملنا ابروتش نتاع حساب وما عملناش الاخرين؟ اسكو كانت عنده خلفيه كان يعرف.
I found the presentation of the guy that did it, right?
Oh yeah?
He was on that thing. Yeah. No, political scientist. He's a political scientist from University of Tunis al-Manaf, actually.
What's his name?
Wallahi, I don't remember. I saw the presentation and...
اما نتصور معناها.
No, these are experts. No.
ما دامهم اكس معناها يعرفوا شنو هما الكونسيكونس نتاع كل ابروتش.
I don't think they know the numbers. No, they're not mathematicians. I mean, these guys.
The explanation I saw at that time was saying that they know there's a big party, which is the Nahda at that time, and they don't want the Nahda to win as much.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
That's what I saw.
Yeah, but it's propaganda. It's
from
propaganda
them or
by
from
Nahda, by Nahda.
Okay.
على خاطر, it's not. I mean, it's a reality in some sense. The fact of the matter is that these are political scientists who do not understand the consequences of numbers, right?
So actually, if you look at your numbers, they could have like a much more.
They could have halved all of it.
Yeah.
It would have been a different political scene. It could have been civil war.
No, but that's.
I would think that they knew what they were doing. And
They don't. And I know
let
that
me
a lot of
finish,
them.
let me finish. But I think that they are trying to be as safe as possible so that there's nobody that really controls the constitution, you know, the Majlis Ta'sis. So this is the safest way. Whether it has, you know, the weak part that control the system.
مجلس تأسيس مش بس العالم.
لا لا لا.
الهيئة
العليا للانتخابات والتغيير الديمقراطي
Yeah, that part I didn't. Yeah,
because they were the one
the
that
organization with the
decided.
long name. Yeah.
They were the one that decided. And this is, and I see this is the safest way. It made everybody that had to
Comfortable,
cooperate.
right?
Because if you go to what you are presenting to us, all the other would give to one party much more power than others. So this is, I don't think it's just but it must have been a conscious decision that
But
this is the safest way for everybody.
And I would agree with you, especially probably not on their mindset, but on the fact that yes, when they chose, I'm pretty sure they knew the consequence, which one would give what kind of result. But then for them, at least that's my reading of the story, they were more concerned about their image on the outside, just to avoid end up with the Algerian case. We don't want to get 70% and then this whole result will be thrown out, nobody will accept it.
So what I have in mind is this expression, you know, like from this is way back in the days, كما جاتش what is it saying? كما جاتش الجرادة ما يحصل عصفور. It's completely arbitrary. It's serendipitous. I mean, that they chose this system, but it worked for the best. I mean, but the reason they did it is because Tunisian society, in my judgment, Allah, is a pretty ideological society. I mean. So people who have opinions, they tend like Jews, right? You either believe or you don't believe. There's nothing in between. I mean,
Well, it takes. I think that's a behavioral thing. It's going to take some time until we can sit together
and chit chat, yeah.
And the Islamists, if you're Islamist, you know, you no longer look at them as the devil or whatever.
I don't see anybody as a devil.
I'm not saying I'm not saying anything. And the ultra lefty, you know, does not see the other one. It's going to take some time so that we are all together in this in managing this country, and we respect each other. I don't see. I think this is a behavioral thing. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be احنا 5 سنين مع بورقيبه هو يحكم ويعمل شيء حاجه.
بن علي مش بورقيبه.
Let me try to wrap it fast, guys, because I don't want to walk all the time because I'm not here to show off. Right? What do you guys think? Propaganda or not propaganda? This one. Well, good numbers, right? Propaganda. This is from NATA. 41% of the vote. I mean, 55.72% of the votes. That's false. It's propaganda. Exactly. What about this one? From a completely impartial person. What is this a huge thing? It cannot be nothing, right? I showed you it's pretty small, right? That's the people that did not vote. It's propaganda.
But they chose not to vote. That's the problem.
But the perception, it's about perceptions, and I keep mentioning. You know, reality is different, right? Reality is if you're not part of the game, you don't count. You're not out of it. That's the way it is. I mean, that's.
But besides, 4.5 million is a good, representation of the 10.6 million.
But they didn't choose. I wish I could.
No. Whoever is voted, if you have 4.6 out of 10 million, that's a good number of people that. That's going to give you, how do you say it?
Échantillonnage. C'est un bon échantillon pour représenter.
If you didn't vote, I don't know, you may be voting for NADA or whatever. Who said that the 5% اللي ما فوتوش كلهم مش يفوتوا للبي دي بي؟ Who said it?
Yeah, so exactly.
My question is, do we know exactly how many people
Did not vote.
did not vote?
No, but
It's all different, like
4.some million, yeah. It's
You
this thing,
mean they
right?
were registered and didn't vote?
لا وصل ل 90% that are.
No, they didn't even register.
نكمل خليكم الوقت نكمل السلايد وبعد نخلي خلينا نكمل السلايد ونعمل
D'accord, guys. This was posted a couple of days ago. Propaganda or not propaganda? Definitely propaganda. D'accord. Okay, so effective number of political parties with respect to the districts, right? On average, about 6 parties. I told you, right, in terms of votes, right? But you can measure these in terms of votes and in terms of seats. I mean, and the measure. It's a statistical measure, right? There's a formula, but this is actually from the wiki for this. I trust it, right? But you can see, like, for example, let me see. I can learn something out of this. For example, in Svets, right? It's a pretty small number of parties, effectively, right? It's a reflection of the fact that Svets society is a conservative one, even though, I mean, Nada. So for me, Nada is a revenge of the South. When I look at the numbers. Absolutely.
Is what?
The revenge of the South.
What does it mean?
I mean, South, all of the South voted for NADA. And there's a guy from the ISIE, Zeki Rahmouni. He posts all kinds of maps. I mean, he was part of it. I mean, he was a statistician, right? By profession, and you can see the maps. They tell you, yeah.
It's good, like there's a big correlation between what you.
Yeah.
But is it like you call it revenge? But if you look at in the US, most of the red districts or the red are in the south. So the question is it a social thing or is it really a revenge? So I'm not sure. I
know,
could agree
I
with
told you
you.
I'm a number person. I don't understand the same. I'm not a social scientist.
I'm going to cover some of that.
Hey, I'm not a social scientist.
Yeah.
Even though I like to read that stuff, I think it's all BS to me. I mean, okay, so here's another piece. For example, in the northwest, like Janduba, say, or what else? Al-Kaf, I think I saw that one. Where's the Kaf? I can't see it. No, but it tells you. I mean, it's quite almost effectively. There are about 10 parties. I mean, in the northwest, right? But why you have only 4 in the south?
Including the independent list or excluding the independent list?
Well, on average, so on average, when you do these are some sorts of averages, right? So if it's a very small percentage, it ain't gonna count. Right? But it tells you, but basically, what does it tell you? You know something about nature. Maybe there is a social, qualitative social thing there. I don't know, because it's a poorer part of the country. Maybe people who sell them on programs might be winning more, right? Maybe people are, voting for the next of kin. I don't know.
So the gap varies what between
like the bottom, like here, like in Germany. I mean, essentially there's only one party because the campaign in Germany was solid. I mean, by Nahda, a lot of political refugees. I mean, the reality is Tunisia. I mean, it's a nasty place to be all days, especially if you're religious. I mean, حقا. Okay, remember, as I told you, we're not using any of these, right? But here, Huntington, that's what, US or Europe? US, definitely, right? Yeah, so Adams, that's also US, right? But you can see that the Adams method and the Hawk method in Belgium is almost the same except for that infinity, which is divided by 0 in the US. Because you gotta have a representative from every state, right? Okay. Saint flag, that's from what country, guys? Switzerland. But we do better than Switzerland, right? And we do better than the Danes, right? I mean, no, the numbers. I mean, the numbers say that we're better than Switzerland, right? But I don't believe it.
If you can go back just from a technical point of view, so I didn't quite understand the difference between the Honk method where you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and the sand like.
So here's the thing.
Odd, in 1, 3, 5.
You تمشي اللاباتوار. You go to the, you're gonna buy علوش العيد. You're gonna buy this Eid lamb, right? So, vente en enchère, maybe you're buying 10 of them, right? And there are several people, right? And you got a lot of money, right? So, and they want to be fair to everyone, right? So, what they do is they look at all what people are offering, right? In terms of the cash that they have, divide them by 1. The one that gets the highest gets the first 4 sheep, right? Then they do the same thing. They slash them by 2. And then they look at the highest in the whole list that is left. And then that next party gets it, right? And you keep doing this, right? There is a reason for this, which I'm going to tell you, that has to do with, again, that's propaganda, right? It has to do with this basic equation, right? Number of representatives in the parliament when you have a capital land should be commensurate with with the proportion that you get out of the votes, right? Just a little math there, right? And you get the integer part, it's a whole number, remember this thing from high school. Different, but almost the same, right? So let's see. So why choose a class of methods and not the other, right? So the divisor methods they don't suffer from these paradoxes, right? The method that we used in Tunisia was devised in 1792 in the US. In the US, as society grows, you grow the number of representatives, right? So they discovered this Alabama paradox when they tried to, increase the size of the parliament, but some states with bigger population increased, but they lost the seat. Right? So this is Alabama paradox. Was found all over the place, but you have other ones too. I'm not going to waste your time. Population paradox, new states paradox, because new states come to the union, right? Like I think one of them taken to the union in the 50s. That's not Alaska. Alaska. There's Alaska and there's the islands, Hawaii, right? Yeah. Okay, etc. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a pictorial image of this by playing this chess game, right? So this chess game is what? These are the 3 parties in the context of Egypt. What are they? No. The people, the army, and maybe Ikhwan or something, right? Okay. Okay, so there is something called the poly representation. So any voting scheme that you do falls in one of these slots, right? So in this case, for example, you use the haunt. The haunt is you divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And say you have 6 seats and you divide them between 3 parties. These are all the possibilities, right? So for example, here, the top party gets 6 and the other ones get 0, 0, right? And this one is symmetric. It's a symmetric picture, right? So it's poly representation. I mean, these are things in higher dimensions, but we're doing it at simple level. So Webster is what happened as I moved from this picture to this picture. We're excising away these portions, right? So in some sense, you're trying to favor smaller parties, right? And the ideal piece is to go to an American system in which, so yeah, this is again, you have less opportunities, right? You're cutting this out, right? If you go to the extreme, this funny division by square root of 2, square root of 6, square root of 20, you get much less possibilities, right? And every party gets at least one seat. Of course, this is not in terms of parties, but this is in terms of states, right?
So that's the American approach.
هذا the Huntington method, yeah. Some people are trying to change it actually, for different reasons.
It's only on the Senate, it's not on the Congress.
لا لا هذا Congress.
Senate
You choose 2 from every state. Yeah. Okay. So the mathematical problem is to convert p's to n, right? And I'm going to show you I'm going to slide through this fast, right? Of course, the sum of the portions add to the whole population, and the sum of the number of representatives add to the whole size of the parliament, right? And what you want is to have this, right? These proportions as close as possible, right? No, you know it's a question about error, right? So if you measure your injustice in terms of this, you're trying to minimize that ratio. You compare it to individual parties, right? So this is like a difference between parties I and J. You could do it that way, right? Or you could do it this way, right? Ideally, if this is equal, you don't care, right? But if you flip, you get a different method. It's the way you measure injustice, right? I mean, you do this all the time, right? I mean, again, if you, the way you measure injustice, right? Because ideally, you want this ratio to be 1, right? Ideally, you want this difference to be 0. Ideally, you want this difference to be 0.
Can the differences be significant?
No?
Can the differences be significant?
Fundamentally, yeah, of course. I mean, I showed you, right? Nada gets from 89 to 162.
That's
Substantial, right?
It's huge, yeah.
You can measure them, I'm just faster. I mean, you can do them individually between parties. I mean, mathematically, these are all the same if it's ideal, right? But you can measure min-max principles. It's like game theory type of stuff, actually. It's in the background. Okay? So you could do them like a statistician, right? Like sums of squares of differences, because if it happens, then all of it, suppose this is 0, right? That means each one of these positive things is 0. That means each ratio is equal to the whole ratio, right? You could do it this way. So you do it this way, that's St. log, right? You do it this way. This is the weighted average, right? So you can do it individual between 2 parties or as averages overall, right? You get Huntington, that's the American method, right? You could do it without weights, right? That one gives you the Harry method. The Harry method is also almost the same, right? So in fact, divisor methods, I mean, largest remainder methods are also Harry type. Are also divisor methods, right? Okay, so if you want to justify it, this is the math part, the proof part. It has to do with the fact that if you add 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7, what happens? It's like you square the number of integers that you have. So there's a funny mathematical little formula that probably some of us learned in high school and did proof by induction. Okay. So the system that we're using for the states, right, is this one, right? Look at, if you compare it with anyone, say for example for Tunis 1, what happens here? Under any other system, you're given less results, right? Because you're trying to favor what? Small states or big states?
Small.
Small states, yeah. Small states, for example, give me an example.
So,
Like Billy, for example, exactly. So Billy, I didn't cut it here, but is there anyone here? Like say for example Monastir, right? Monastir, under any other system you get 7 here. If you use the haunt, you could get 10, right? But you're favoring small parties.
So Monastir was given the same weight as Tunis.
Pretty much, yeah, even though it's a smaller population. So this tells you that whoever designed the system is a wise man or a wise woman, right? I mean, because they know the game. I mean,
Yes, that doesn't so they had something
yeah,
in the back of their mind.
yeah, no,
the
Tunis,
concept was something else.
there are many layers. It's not just your ideology. I mean, personal relation is
but can you
big.
go back? Monastir is the same as Tunis.
Hey, Monastir, but the population-wise,
Population is the same.
سامحني وين؟
Yeah.
around the 19, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Because Tunis was divided.
But they
into two parts.
did because they divided Tunis العاصمة into.
Yeah, I know, but Tunis then it's larger because Tunis Asma is great. It's like two,
Yeah.
and then Ariana.
So the one that I didn't show is like Billy.
Yeah, probably, yeah, those are.
Zawad.
Zawad, yeah.
Is 1/3.
But you know there's another Queen Dido type of thing. Guys, don't panic. There's another Analysi type of thing. I mean, there's an isoperimetric problem in the back of this. if you want to optimize the division of the districts, what do you do? Where should you cut? The way ISIE did it is a traditional cut اللي يرجع للسبعينات في تونس. اللي تونس مقسمة لأربعة regions, 4 regions. You know, the north, northwest, center, and south. South starts in Sfax and down, right? So Taqsima Day apparently it's even very ancient. It goes back to the Romans, in fact. So because the Romans they had this يسموها الفوسا راجيا. الفوسا راجيا تشوف القصان بتاع هذا السور كما سور الصين العظيم موجودين زوز اسوار بتاع الصين العظيم في تونس.
We'll cover this in detail.
Great. Okay. So let me run fast. Okay. You guys are going to talk about this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Highest seat, the most expensive seat for the Azma is 28,000. That's in Qatar. And the cheapest was in Italy. If you pay this much, you get that seat. But you could pay less. In fact, you pay way less. You could pay as many as 2,782 votes and get that seat. Which seat was this? The Passas guy, exactly. Okay, so that's the dude. So actually, he borrowed 10,000 votes to get. Look at Billy. Billy is 13,000, right? He has to borrow from whoever did not vote 10,000 votes, almost 11,000 votes, right? You could do the calculation this way. Now I told you about wasted votes. I'm going to tell you about what. How much should you borrow for the next Eid? Okay, you could borrow from the people that did not vote. If you do the calculation that way, you get about 1.3 million people. يعني ما عندكش باش تسلف, right? You have to borrow from somebody. Qassas had only $2,000. And Alush is about 13,000. Okay. If you do it that way, look at this, guys. The number of first round seats is only 76. The bulk of the parties sell for. They had to borrow. 141 seats are on borrowed time. Okay. Guys, I think I stayed too long. Let's see. You could do this calculation here with Marzouki. If you think about the way he was voted into his seat, it was done in the parliament, right? 217 seats, he divided by 2, 108.5, so he could become president with 109 seats, right? The electoral college in the US. So you could ask, if that's the case, what's Marzouki's strategy? You should go after large states or small states?
Small.
You could do it either way. In the US, if you go after large states, you can win with the popular vote of 27%. If you go after smaller states, you can become president with 22%. Even though it's only 50%, right? In the case of Tunisia, if you go after large states, he won with 40 to 60% of the vote. If you go after small state, you can with as low as 40%. Okay. I think I'm gonna cut here because it's way too much.
No, I'm waiting for this one because you
Okay, so serious? Okay. Sorry guys, I talked too much.
Let's not interrupt Luffy and then finish.
Okay, so I'm done. Almost. So there are 3 stories that go back to Ali ibn Abi Talib. And I think it's reconstructed history, in fact. Because this one we learned as kids, actually. I don't know if you guys remember this one, but if you're of my age, maybe you remember. There was a story from primaire, like maybe when we were 7, 8, about this judge. And 3 kids come to a judge and they ask him, our father left 17 camels, and he said half for the first one, a third for the second, and a ninth for the third. How should we cut it? Because 17, 3 and 9 and 2 don't go into 17. It's a prime number, right? So this judge said, okay, I'm going to add a camel and do the division. So that's 18, right? If you take half of 18, that's how much? 9. Okay, 9 for the first, and then you take a third of 18. That's 6. So that's 9 plus 6 is what? 15, and 2 are left. That's a 9. That's a ninth of the 18, and then he took his camel and left. So this story we're told as kids. At least when I was growing up, at all. Okay, and you can do it here. It's a voting scheme, really. Except in the case of Ali, what did he do? He added a number, right? So that he added a camel, so that it's a multiple, right? So in fact, this vote, the case, inheritance case in this case, right, has to do with finding multiples of the fractions, because the Quran full of fractions, right? Talks about detailed fractions, right? So they look for the PPCM, right? PPCM, long time ago, remember these things? So that's what these things are, right? You could do it, so here, the story as it appears, because Ali, we find it in Shia books, right? That's Badi'iyat al-Muqri, this Shia guy from Yemen. You find it in secular text, this is from a website in Algeria, right? Or you also find it in Sunni business, right? But this one, they attribute it to a judge in the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, very famous judge, right? Remember the story of Ali with the Jewish guy who had his sword or something? Okay, one time. Nobody cares, right? Yeah. There, Samahni. Okay, here's another story, guys. This is a Masala Dinariya. A woman comes to Ali and he's on top of his horse. And she says, you know, my brother left 600 dinars and I only got a buck. Pretty lousy buck. I mean, so Ali thinks a little bit. He says, you have so-and-so brothers, so this guy left so-and-so daughters and a wife and something. She said, yes, and he says, that's your portion. He's good with numbers, right? But he's thinking in terms of multiples, right? Because he knows the fractions, I don't remember the fractions. But you can do it also in terms of those things. Here's a third masala, right? Another problem. This one, he was on top of the minbar, right? And the pulpit. And it was 24 dinars, right? In different proportions, right? And he sold it right there. Okay, and he said something that became like basically like a rule, right? For people who do inheritance, right? And this one, even though it says alayhi salam, right? That's from, I think it's a Sunni, because it's, the guy quotes Abbas Aqad is Sunni. Okay, and you can do these things actually. We can explain it in terms of logic, right? I'm not going to do it. But you can find this in a lot of these stories. You can find them in a cute book that you can buy at Barnes & Noble, called The Man Who Counted, right? You can buy it for like 17 bucks. And it's written by a guy that I cannot pronounce his name. But it says it's a Brazilian, actually. It's a Brazilian author that wrote in the 1940s.
Sorry, you cannot.
You can buy it, yeah, I gave it to a little kid. So I can tell you guys that word actually means somebody who kind of like lays down, right? Tahi, actually, not that one. Okay. So, but the story actually of the camels is there, but it's with a 35 camels instead, right? So that's a pseudonym, it's not his real name, right? And he quotes text from 1907 by two French guys. I mean, and most probably since it's camels, it has to do with the Arab world, so yeah, that's not. Okay, he solves the problem, but in this case, rather than adding a camel and taking it away, he wins a camel by tricking these kids. And actually, if you do voting, he doesn't have to trick anybody. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. Okay, so quick note about this Californication business. I mean, so Californication has to do with the Khilafah debate, right? I mean, not California. Okay, so the oldest text that you can find anything about this kind of stuff, right, is in Ibn Rushd, actually. But you find it in the Hebrew text translated into English, because the original Arabic was burned at this time because people didn't like it. So yeah, the text does exist in Hebrew and it's translated into English, right? But then the Arabic original is not there, right? Okay, so he talks about the first experiment in democracy in the Islamic world in Cordoba in the 11th century. 50 years of this, right? And then it disappeared, right? Because John the Barber came into the picture and the army took over. Okay? And actually, in his case, he talks about the Murabtin. I mean, Murabtin, this hardcore, right? Tashfin and all these guys. So the next generation after the founding father, in fact, it was not the father, it's not just Yusuf ibn Tashfin. The real power behind the throne was his wife. And if you look at her name, it sounds like it's from the Gabon region, in fact. But this woman married so many men until she got to Yusuf and she got the power she wanted. Because in Mauritania, they like divorced women for some reason. Still today, it's a fact, actually. Yeah. So and that's an issue, right? And if you go actually, if you read Ben Ashur's blog from when they were debating this stuff, this guy knows. He knows too much. He really knows about this stuff, this whole debate, right? And he knows about the Medina al-Jami'a, that's the democracy in Arabic, right? And he knows about what democracy. The democracy is the term that appears in the text of Averroes. Democracy ruled by honor, بالذمة يعني. So that Tima is actually Arabic too, even though it's a Greek word. Okay, and if you say go to like the Encyclopedia of Islam, you find a huge debate about Jumhuriyya in the foundation of the text. And in fact, it tells us that the first people that brought this into the public debate were Ottoman scholars, trying to understand Khilafah in the context of these modern concepts, and the term they found for this is Jumhuriyya. So in their understanding, the Khilafah, the original one, is a Jumhuriyya. Now, it's a different game right now. Okay, this is something that I'm going to steal the idea from Moore, because apparently Moore is the last bastion against a lot of these people. He says that actually, Tunisia, Sabah Futuhat, right? 7 conquests, and each time these guys renege and go back, right? So this is the oldest coin from Tunisia, right? Goes back to 715, right? That's about 17 years after the conquest of Carthage. And they minted the coins for 150 years, right? With the Latin text in them, right? In Latin, right? So it takes time for societies to change, right? You can't just force things on people, right? Okay, and you see La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah on both sides, and it's in Latin, right? Okay, I think this is where I wrap things. Thank you.